when a simple hug from a stranger made his daughter smile. A billionaire father realized some lessons money could never buy. The morning had started like any other, but for one billionaire father, it carried a rare sense of quiet anticipation. He wasn't used to mornings like this. Normally, his days were filled with endless meetings, phone calls that never ended, and the constant hum of decisions that affected thousands of lives. But today was different. Today he had promised his daughter that they would spend the morning together, just the two of them. No schedules, no boardrooms, no world-shaking choices, just them. His daughter had been waiting for this day all week. She was a bright, sensitive little girl, no more than 7, with big brown eyes that always seemed to notice everything. She had grown up surrounded by luxury, but she was innocent enough not to fully understand the implications of money and fame. What she knew was her father was usually too busy for her, and that made these rare moments all the more precious. She clutched his hand as they walked through the streets, enjoying the simple freedom of being together. The warmth of the sun felt nice on her face, and she skipped slightly to match the rhythm of his long, purposeful steps. The father had chosen a small diner for their outing, a place that was nothing like the high-end restaurants he usually frequented. It was modest, with vinyl booths, checkered floors, and the smell of fresh coffee that seemed to hug the senses. The daughter's eyes lit up immediately. She liked the simplicity, the way the tables were arranged close enough that she could hear little snippets of conversation from other people without feeling exposed. It felt safe, cozy, and perfect. As they entered, the little girl looked around curiously, her gaze stopping at the waitress who greeted them with a warm smile. There was something about her energy that seemed gentle and kind. The father, while polite, barely noticed the interaction at first. His mind was still partly in work mode, thinking about the emails he would have to answer later and the meeting that could not be missed. But slowly he began to notice the small ways his daughter moved. The subtle frown when she looked at the empty chair across from them, a chair that would have been hers with her mother. Her mother had been away for some time. She wasn't in the picture as much as she used to be. And the absence was something the little girl felt keenly, even if she didn't always voice it. Today, the longing seemed stronger, as if the morning air itself reminded her of the emptiness she sometimes felt. She hesitated for a moment, then quietly, almost shyly, she spoke to the waitress. "Can I have a hug?" she asked, her small voice carrying a weight that only a child could give to such a request. She wasn't asking out of fear or sadness, really, but out of a deep need for comfort, for someone to simply acknowledge that she was there and that her feelings mattered. The billionaire father stopped in his tracks without realizing it. He had heard the words, but what struck him more was the way the waitress responded. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She smiled, gentle and understanding, and knelt slightly to reach the girl's level. Her arms opened naturally, and the little girl stepped in, feeling an immediate sense of warmth and safety. The father watched, his heart tightening in a way he hadn't expected. He had seen countless people in his life, employees, assistants, celebrities, business partners, but never had he seen someone offer something so simple and human without expecting anything in return. The hug was brief, but it was enough to change the little girl's demeanor. She came back to the table with a small smile, her eyes brighter than before. The waitress straightened up, gave the father a polite nod, and continued taking orders from other customers, but something had shifted. The father couldn't look away. He found himself studying the waitress, noticing the gentle lines around her eyes, the warmth in her posture, and the way she made a simple act feel profound. For the first time in a long while, he felt a pang of guilt for how much of his daughter's life he had missed while pursuing his empire. They sat down, and for a while there was silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The little girl played with the napkin on the table, occasionally glancing at her father as if waiting for him to say something. The father, meanwhile, was lost in thought. He remembered all the times he had promised to spend time with her and had been pulled away by urgent calls or meetings. He remembered the birthdays, the school events, the nights he had missed tucked into work behind closed doors. And now, in this small diner, watching a stranger comfort his daughter, he realized the magnitude of what he had been missing. He began to engage more actively, asking her about the drawings she had been working on at school, the little stories she liked to tell, the imaginary adventures she had in her mind. She responded eagerly, her earlier sadness replaced with excitement. The hug had been more than just comfort, it had been a bridge between her lonely feelings and the loving presence of her father. He listened intently, nodding, laughing softly at her stories, and feeling something he hadn't felt in years. A deep connection that money could not buy. The waitress returned briefly with their order, and the father noticed the quiet professionalism in her demeanor. She had given his daughter exactly what she needed, and yet she carried on with her work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That humility, that natural kindness, struck him even more. He began to think about the kind of world he wanted his daughter to grow up in, realizing that she needed more than wealth and security. She needed people who could see her heart, who could respond to her emotions with care. And in that moment, he understood that the waitress had done something far more valuable than any luxury he could provide. She had shown her daughter that someone noticed her feelings and responded with love. The little girl, sensing her father's quiet reflection, reached out and held his hand again. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight. She was giving him a chance to be present, to show that he could be more than just a distant figure in her life. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her tiny fingers, and silently vowed to himself that he would try harder. Not for appearances, not for public praise, but for the sake of moments like this, moments that mattered infinitely more than any business deal or headline. Time seemed to stretch as they sat there, eating their meal and exchanging stories. Other diners came and went, but the father barely noticed them. His focus was entirely on his daughter, on her laughter, her shy glances, and the way she seemed lighter after that simple, unexpected hug. He reflected on the irony that it had taken a stranger's kindness to awaken him to his own shortcomings. But he was grateful nonetheless. It was a lesson he would never forget. By the time they left the diner, the father felt a shift within himself. He held his daughter's hand firmly as they walked out into the sunlight, the city bustling around them as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything had changed. He realized that the true measure of a moment, of a life, was not in wealth, power, or fame, but in the connections we nurture and the love we offer, both expected and unexpected. And for his daughter, this day would remain etched in her memory as one where a simple act of kindness from a stranger had reminded her that she was seen, loved, and safe. The little girl's hug had barely ended, but the impact lingered in the air. She stepped back, brushing her small hands on her dress, her cheeks tinged with a rosy glow. The warmth of the embrace seemed to have lifted a heavy weight she had been carrying for days. The billionaire father watched silently, his heart tightening and loosening at the same time, emotions he hadn't fully felt in years bubbling to the surface. He noticed the subtle shift in his daughter's demeanor, the way her shoulders relaxed, the tiny smile forming on her lips, and the sparkle returning to her eyes. It was remarkable to see how something so simple, a hug from a kind stranger, makes such a difference. He felt a mixture of awe and self-reproach. He had grown up in a world of luxury, where emotions were often overshadowed by schedules and status. And somehow, in the race for success, he had missed many moments like this. The realization struck him with a quiet force. Comfort and care were not things that could be bought or scheduled. They had to be given, shared, and felt. And yet, here was a stranger, a waitress with no obligation, providing exactly what his daughter needed at that moment. The waitress straightened up, adjusting her apron, her eyes meeting his briefly with a soft nod. There was no hint of pretension, no sense of expectation, just pure human kindness. The father found himself staring at her, realizing that her act had awakened something inside him, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Vulnerability. Watching her interact with his daughter so naturally, he felt the walls around his own emotions begin to soften. His daughter, still holding on to the lingering comfort of the hug, began to fidget with the small trinkets she had brought along in her pocket, her attention momentarily distracted. The father reached out instinctively and took her hand, feeling the small, reassuring grip of her tiny fingers. "Did that make you feel better?" he asked quietly, his voice softer than usual. She nodded eagerly, her eyes bright. "Yes, Daddy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She made me feel happy." It was a small confession, but it struck the father deeply. He realized that his daughter, despite her young age, understood and appreciated genuine care. And more importantly, he understood that he had been missing the opportunity to offer that care himself. The hug was more than just comfort. It was a mirror showing him what he had overlooked all these years as they sat down at the booth. Waiting for their order, the father found himself observing the waitress in a new light. She moved with ease among the tables, balancing trays of food and coffee cups. Always aware of the customers, yet somehow maintaining a warmth that drew people to her. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that commanded respect without demanding it. He noticed the subtle gestures, the way she listened when someone spoke, the genuine smile she offered to the elderly couple in the corner, the way she reassured a young boy who had dropped his napkin. Each small action built a picture of someone who cared deeply, someone who understood the power of human connection. The father's mind wandered back to his own life, to the countless boardrooms, the high-stakes meetings, and the endless decisions that had defined him for so long. In that moment, he realized that those accomplishments, while impressive, had often come at the cost of moments like this, moments where true presence mattered more than any contract or deal. The waitress, in her simple, unassuming way, was showing him a lesson he hadn't known he needed. Empathy and care were invaluable, and they could not be replaced by wealth or status. The little girl, sensing her father's attention, leaned slightly closer to him. "Daddy," she said softly, "can we come here again?" Her eyes searched his face for reassurance, and he felt a pang of emotion that made his chest tighten. "Of course," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. "We can come whenever you want." It was a promise, but it was also a commitment, a silent vow that he would try to be more present, more attentive, and more attuned to her needs as their food arrived. The father found himself observing the interaction between his daughter and the waitress with a quiet fascination. The waitress returned briefly, placing a small plate of pancakes in front of the girl, her hands steady and careful. "Here you go," she said softly with a smile that seemed to convey understanding. "I hope you enjoy it." The daughter's eyes lit up, and she thanked her politely, a little bow of her head accompanying the words. The father felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the food, but for the kindness that had transformed his daughter's mood so completely. He began to reflect on the small, yet profound ways that people could touch each other's lives. The waitress didn't need to hug his daughter. She didn't even know the family. Yet, she had given something invaluable, a sense of comfort, recognition, and care. He realized that such moments were rare, and that he had been blind to them for too long. The lesson was simple, but powerful. Human connection was a force stronger than wealth, stronger than influence, and stronger than any achievement he had ever known. His daughter, now happily eating her pancakes, glanced up at him from time to time, her eyes full of trust and warmth. Each glance reminded him of the responsibility he had, just to provide for her materially, but to nurture her emotionally. He had spent so much time building an empire, yet the empire felt hollow in comparison to the simple happiness he could bring to his daughter. He felt a quiet determination rising within him, to be the kind of father who was truly present, who noticed, who cared, and who acted on that care. The waitress moved gracefully around the diner, occasionally glancing at the table to ensure everything was all right. The father watched her, noting the way she handled challenges with patience and calm, the way she balanced multiple responsibilities without losing her humanity. It was a rare quality, one that he admired silently. He found himself wanting to understand her better, not just as a waitress, but as a person who had reminded him of what truly mattered. As the meal progressed, the father engaged his daughter in conversation, asking about her favorite games, her stories from school, and the little adventures she imagined. She responded eagerly, her earlier sadness fading with every word. He listened intently, laughing softly at her stories, marveling at her imagination, and feeling a connection that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. It was a simple, profound joy, the kind of joy that could not be manufactured, bought, or scheduled. The father realized that the hug, brief as it had been, had set off a ripple of change. His daughter's happiness was tangible, and he felt the weight of his own emotional neglect lifting slightly. He understood in a way he hadn't before that nurturing her spirit was as important as providing for her materially. The waitress had shown him this truth with her small, quiet act of kindness, and he was determined not to forget it as they finished their meal. The father felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. The little girl was content, her laughter occasionally filling the diner. Her joy, a bright light that seemed to push away the shadows of the father's busy, stressful life. He realized that these moments of genuine connection, love, and understanding were far more valuable than any business success. Before leaving, he made a point to thank the waitress personally. "Thank you," he said sincerely, his voice carrying a depth of emotion that surprised even him. "You've done something wonderful today. You've made my daughter very happy, and you've reminded me of what really matters." The waitress smiled warmly, her eyes soft. "It was my pleasure," she said simply. "She's a sweet girl. Just remember, sometimes the smallest gestures can mean the most." The father nodded, taking her words to heart. He watched as she moved on to assist another table, her presence calm and reassuring, her kindness effortless. And as he took his daughter's hand to leave, he felt a quiet determination. He would not let this moment be a fleeting one. He would carry it with him, allowing it to shape the way he related to his daughter, the way he approached life, in the way he understood the true value of human connection. Outside, the city bustled with activity, but inside him, a shift had occurred. The little girl skipped happily beside him, her laughter echoing in his mind. He realized that wealth could provide comfort, but it could not provide love, understanding, or presence. Those had to be given freely, with attention and care. And today, a stranger had shown him exactly how to do it. The father watched as his daughter happily nibbled on the pancakes, her small hands clutching the fork tightly, occasionally glancing up at him with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire diner. Her laughter was light and infectious, filling the space around them in a way that made even the other diners glance over and smile. He realized just how rare these moments were, and how much he had been missing while chasing the relentless demands of his life. For a long time, he had thought that giving her everything money could buy was enough. But now he saw that what she truly craved was attention, understanding, and care. The waitress had given her a glimpse of that. And the father felt an unexpected wave of gratitude toward her as the waitress moved past their table. The father found himself saying, almost instinctively, "Could I speak with you for a moment?" She looked at him with curiosity but nodded, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. The father's heart was pounding. He wasn't used to approaching people in such a personal way. His life was filled with powerful conversations, negotiations, and deals. But this felt different. This was personal. This was real. He wanted to understand what made her so kind, so aware, so patient. "Thank you for earlier," he began, his voice slightly hesitant. "You didn't have to. But you comforted my daughter in a way I couldn't. I just want to know how you do it. How do you stay so caring?" The waitress smiled softly, a mix of humility and warmth. "It's not anything special," she said. "I just try to see people, really see them, and respond. Sometimes all someone needs is a little kindness, a little attention. That's it. It doesn't take money, or time, or effort. Just presence." The father nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized that in all his years of accumulation and ambition, he had never truly understood what it meant to be present. He had always been busy, always planning, always thinking about what came next. And in the process, he had missed the small, essential moments with his daughter, the moments that shaped her happiness and sense of security. He looked down at her, chewing quietly on a piece of pancake, unaware of the conversation. Yet the effect of the hug still lingering in her eyes. The waitress continued to speak, her voice calm and steady. She told him about her own life, about the struggles of balancing work, family, and personal challenges. She shared stories of moments when someone's smile or a small gesture had changed her day, and how she carried that with her, hoping to offer the same to others. The father listened intently, realizing that the lessons she was giving him were ones he could not buy, ones he had never learned in his elite circles. He felt a strange connection forming, a bridge between his world and hers, built entirely on empathy and understanding. His daughter, sensing the adult conversation happening nearby, looked up curiously. "Daddy, who is she?" she asked innocently. The father smiled, his gaze softening. "She's someone very kind," he replied. "Someone who reminded me how important it is to care for people, especially the people we love." The little girl nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she could say, and then returned to her pancakes with renewed energy. The father felt a quiet sense of relief this moment. This rare connection was something he wanted to preserve and nurture. As they continued to talk, the father asked the waitress about her experiences with children and families. Genuinely curious about her perspective, she spoke about patience, empathy, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. She mentioned that sometimes children needed comfort that no money could provide. Attention that went deeper than gifts or indulgences. Each word resonated deeply with him, highlighting the gap between his own understanding and the emotional needs of his daughter. He realized that while he had provided material abundance, he had often failed to provide emotional abundance, the very thing his daughter needed most. The waitress shared a story about a little girl she had comforted in her own family long ago, a girl who had been lonely and misunderstood, much like his own daughter had been in that moment. She described the small ways she had offered support hugs, words of encouragement, attention to small details, and how those gestures had helped the child feel seen and valued. The father felt a lump in his throat as he recognized the parallels between that story and his own daughter's experience. He had always thought that financial security equated to happiness, but now he understood that emotional presence was what truly mattered. The father glanced at his daughter again. Noticing the subtle changes in her behavior since the hug, she seemed lighter, freer, and more open. Her smile was genuine, and her eyes sparkled with a joy that he hadn't seen in a long time. He realized that the waitress's small act of kindness had unlocked a world of possibilities for their relationship, a world where attention, empathy, and presence could create bonds stronger than any luxury or wealth could provide. He felt a growing determination to change, to be a father who not only provided but also nurtured, who listened, and who understood. The waitress noticed his thoughtful gaze and smiled knowingly. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we underestimate the power of small acts. A hug, a kind word, a moment of listening can mean more than we realize. And it's never too late to start giving those moments." The father nodded, the weight of her words settling into his heart. He understood that this encounter was more than chance. It was a lesson, an awakening, a reminder of what truly mattered in life. He decided to engage more actively with his daughter during the rest of their meal. He asked about her drawings, her stories, her dreams, and listened with genuine interest. He laughed with her, shared small anecdotes from his own childhood, and for the first time in years, felt the warmth of a real connection. The little girl responded eagerly, her energy and curiosity infectious, and he realized that these moments of genuine interaction were far more valuable than anything money could buy. The father reflected on the irony, that it had taken a stranger's kindness to open his eyes to his own shortcomings. Yet he felt grateful for the reminder. The waitress had shown him that emotional connection was not complicated. It required only attention, presence, and care. It was a lesson he vowed to carry forward, not just for his daughter, but for himself as well, as they prepared to leave the diner. The father thanked the waitress once again. "I can't express how much this has meant," he said sincerely. "You've reminded me of what's important. I hope you know that." The waitress smiled gently. "It was nothing," she said humbly. "Just remember, being present and kind is something everyone can do. It doesn't take money or power, just a willing heart." The father watched her return to her work, observing the ease and grace with which she moved among the tables. He felt a quiet sense of admiration, but more importantly, he felt a deep internal shift. He understood now that the greatest legacy he could leave his daughter was not wealth, but love, attention, and the ability to connect genuinely. He held his daughter's hand as they stepped outside, feeling the warmth of her grip and the soft, reassuring weight of her trust. Walking down the street, the little girl skipped happily beside him, her laughter bright and carefree. The father, for the first time in a long time, felt completely present. He noticed the details of the city, the sounds of life around them, and most importantly, the joy radiating from his daughter. He realized that moments like this, moments of connection, understanding, and love, were rare and precious. They were the moments that shaped a child's sense of security, happiness, self-worth. As they continued their walk, the father silently vowed to carry the lesson he had learned from the waitress. He would strive to be more attentive, more patient, and more emotionally present. He would ensure that his daughter knew she was seen, heard, and loved not just through material provision, but through his presence, understanding, and care. The hug had been small, the act simple, but its impact was profound. It had awakened him to what truly mattered, and he would not forget it by the time they returned home. The father felt a quiet peace he hadn't known in years. His daughter was cheerful, content, and full of life, and he carried with him the memory of the waitress's kindness. He knew that this was just the beginning of a journey, not just for him but for their relationship. From that day on, he would remember that the most important things in life were often the simplest: a hug, kind word, a moment of presence. And in those moments, love was made real. The father and his daughter left the diner with a new sense of warmth between them. As they walked down the sunlit streets, her small hand securely in his, he felt something stirring inside him, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and determination. The hug, the pancakes, the gentle attention from the waitress had all left an impression far deeper than he expected. He realized that today wasn't just about a meal or a rare morning together. It was about connection, understanding, and the small human moments that shaped a child's heart. The little girl skipped along happily, her laughter filling the air. The father matched her pace, walking slowly enough to let her set the rhythm. What? Pined a ride. Daddy, she asked, her voice bright. Can we come back to that diner again soon? I like it there. He smiled down at her, feeling a quiet swell of emotion. Of course, he said, squeezing her hand gently. We'll come whenever you want. He realized that it wasn't the diner itself that mattered, but the experience, the feeling of being seen, valued, and loved. The father couldn't stop thinking about the waitress. She had handled the moment with such care, so naturally, and yet he knew that it wasn't something everyone could do. There was a calm confidence in her actions, a deep understanding of human emotions that made her presence reassuring and powerful. He began to think about her not just as a stranger who had comforted his daughter, but as someone with insight into the importance of empathy and kindness. For the first time, he wanted to understand more about her life, what shaped her, and how she managed to touch the hearts of people so effortlessly. As they continued their walk, he decided to ask his daughter more about her feelings. Did you feel better after the hug? He asked softly, wanting her to articulate the moment that had meant so much. She nodded eagerly. Yes, Daddy, I felt safe, like someone really understood me. The father felt a lump in his throat. It was a simple statement, but it carried profound weight. He realized that he had been blind to these needs for so long. He'd assumed that his presence alone, his provision of luxury, could fill the gap left by his absence, but the truth was clear. Children needed emotional attention, genuine connection, and reassurance that someone truly cared. The father thought back to the waitress's words. Sometimes all someone needs is a little kindness, a little attention. That's it, just presence. Those words echoed in his mind, and he realized how powerful they were. He had spent his life chasing accomplishments, wealth, and recognition, believing that success would translate into happiness for his family. But now he saw that true happiness came from being present, from offering attention and love in ways that couldn't be bought. He made a silent promise to himself to carry this lesson forward, not just in theory, but in action. His daughter suddenly pointed toward a small park on the street, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can we play there for a little while?" she asked. The father agreed, and together they wandered into the park. The sounds of children laughing and birds singing filling the space around them. He watched her run freely, her energy infectious, and felt a rare sense of peace. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to enjoy a simple, unstructured moment without thinking about schedules, meetings, or obligations. It was liberating, and he realized how much he had been missing by constantly prioritizing work over moments like this. Sitting on a nearby bench, he watched his daughter climb the small jungle gym, laughing as she slid down the slide again and again. He marveled at how quickly the hug from the waitress had transformed her mood, how a simple act of kindness could create such a lasting effect. It wasn't just about comfort. It was about trust, safety, and emotional nourishment. He thought about the countless times he had missed opportunities to offer such moments himself, and a quiet determination settled in his chest. He would never allow that gap to remain unfilled again. As the afternoon passed, he began to engage more deeply with his daughter. They played small games, told stories, and shared little jokes. He listened to her dreams, asked questions about her friends, and encouraged her imagination. Each interaction reinforced the lesson he had learned from the waitress: presence mattered more than anything else. It was a skill, an art, and a gift that he could give freely. With each laugh, each shared glance, and each story told, he felt his connection with his daughter strengthen in ways that no business deal or luxury item ever could. The father's mind kept returning to the waitress, wondering about her life and her values. He wanted to understand what drove her kindness, how she maintained her warmth in a world that often demanded toughness and pragmatism. It occurred to him that people like her had a rare gift, the ability to see beyond appearances and to respond with empathy without expectation. He felt inspired, realizing that he could learn from her example and incorporate it into his own life. Her actions had sparked a transformation within him, a desire to be a better parent, a better person, and a more present figure in his daughter's world. After a while, they decided to walk back toward the car, the little girl's hand still firmly in his. She chattered about everything she had seen in the park, her excitement uncontainable. The father responded thoughtfully, asking questions, listening actively, and sharing observations of his own. He noticed the difference between this interaction and his usual routines, how much richer and more rewarding it felt to be fully engaged in her world. He realized that the value of these moments could not be measured in money or time saved. They existed purely in the shared experience and the bond they nurtured. As they approached the car, the father paused, looking down at his daughter. "Oh, I want to do more of this," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want to spend time with you like this, every chance we get, not just sometimes, but as much as we can." The little girl's eyes widened with delight, and she threw her arms around his neck in a spontaneous hug. He hugged her back, feeling the warmth and trust that radiated from her small body, and he knew that this moment would stay with both of them forever. Driving home, he reflected on the day and the subtle but powerful changes it had brought. He realized that the act of the waitress had been more than just a kind gesture. It had been a catalyst, opening his eyes to the emotional needs of his daughter and the importance of nurturing those needs actively. He understood now that parenting was not just about providing material comfort, but about being present, offering attention, and responding to emotions with care and understanding. He thought about the life lessons he wanted to instill in his daughter values, like empathy, compassion, and understanding. He realized that these lessons were best taught through example, through action, rather than words alone. The waitress had shown him what it meant to live with kindness and awareness, and he was determined to bring that lesson into his own parenting. He knew it would not be easy. Old habits and the demands of his life would continue to challenge him, but he felt ready to try in a way he never had before. Back at home, his daughter ran to her room to play, energy still high, and he watched her from the doorway. He felt a quiet pride and deep affection, coupled with a recognition of how much he had to learn. But more importantly, he felt hope that through attention, care, and presence, he could strengthen their bond and provide the love she needed. He resolved to carry the memory of the waitress's kindness with him, allowing it to guide him in small, consistent ways. The father's transformation was subtle, but real. He began to notice the little things his daughter's expressions, her moods, her quiet needs, and he responded with patience and attention. He realized that it was the small gestures, the consistent presence, the moments of understanding that would matter most in shaping her sense of security and happiness. The waitress had shown him the way, and he was determined to follow it, not just for one day, but for the long journey ahead. By evening, they sat together quietly, sharing a simple dinner. The little girl talked animatedly about her day, and the father listened, fully present, asking questions and responding with genuine interest. He felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of wealth or accomplishment had ever provided. He realized that happiness was not found in possessions or power, but in the bonds we nurture, the care we offer, and the love we express. The day had begun as a simple outing, but it had grown into a profound lesson in empathy, presence, and the transformative power of small, meaningful gestures. As he tucked his daughter into bed that night, he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you. I'll always be here for you." Her eyes shone with trust and contentment, and she hugged him tightly. The father held her close, feeling the depth of connection that had begun to grow earlier that day. He knew that the bond they had strengthened today would continue to grow, nurtured by attention, care, and the lessons learned from an unexpected encounter with a kind stranger. The father woke the next morning with a quiet determination stirring in his chest. The previous day had been a revelation, a glimpse into a world where presence mattered more than wealth, kindness more than power, and genuine connection more than any material offering. He remembered the hug, the way the waitress had instinctively comforted his daughter, and the way it had changed her mood in an instant. He thought about her words, how simple acts could hold immense value, and he felt a deep need to carry that lesson forward. Today, he told himself, would be another chance to nurture that bond. To be truly present in his daughter's life, the little girl bounced into the kitchen, her eyes bright with energy and curiosity. "Good morning, Daddy," she chirped, her small hands clapping together. He smiled, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "Good morning, sweetheart," he replied softly. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded eagerly, and he noticed a lingering lightness in her demeanor, a reflection of the emotional comfort she had received the day before. He realized that her happiness was a direct reflection of the attention and care she experienced, and he felt a quiet pride mixed with responsibility. Over breakfast, they talked about the day ahead. The father suggested they take a walk in the park, a place where they could enjoy time together away from the distractions of work, calls, and obligations. The little girl's face lit up at the idea, and she quickly finished her toast before rushing to put on her shoes. He watched her, marveling at the simple joy in her movements, and felt a strong desire to preserve this happiness for as long as possible. Each small gesture, each attentive word, each shared laugh had become far more meaningful than any material possession could ever be. Walking hand in hand through the park, the father reflected on the lessons he had learned from the waitress. He thought about her empathy, her patience, and her ability to see people's emotions clearly. He realized that kindness and presence were not innate qualities, but choices that required awareness, effort, and the willingness to engage with the world sincerely. He resolved to embody those qualities in his interactions with his daughter, knowing that the long-term impact on her emotional well-being would be far greater than any gift or luxury he could provide. As they reached a quiet corner of the park, the little girl began to play on the swings. The father pushed her gently, enjoying the simple thrill of seeing her soar into the air. She laughed, the sound ringing through the park, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For so long, his life had been defined by schedules, obligations, and the relentless pursuit of success. But here, in these moments of genuine connection, he discovered a joy he had never truly known. He realized that the simplest acts of attention and engagement, listening, playing, hugging, encouraging, were far more powerful than the largest displays of wealth. After a while, they sat on a bench to rest. The little girl leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Daddy," she said softly, "I like spending time with you like this. I feel happy." Her words were innocent, yet they carried a profound truth. Emotional presence mattered more than anything else. He gently stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm happy too, sweetheart. I'll always make time for you." He knew that promises like these needed to be fulfilled, not just in words, but in consistent actions. The father found himself reflecting on his past choices. The countless hours spent in meetings, the events missed, the milestones overlooked. He realized that while he had provided security and material abundance, he had neglected the emotional nourishment that his daughter craved. The waitress had shown him a new perspective, reminding him that empathy, attention, and presence were priceless gifts. He vowed to integrate that lesson into his life fully, creating a nurturing environment where his daughter felt seen, heard, and valued as they continued their walk. The father began to engage his daughter in deeper conversation. He asked about her dreams, her favorite stories, and the things that made her happy or scared. She responded eagerly, her eyes shining with trust and excitement. Each response reminded him of the importance of active listening, of truly understanding her inner world. He felt a growing commitment to be a father who not only provided, but also understood, supported, and nurtured. The day had become an opportunity to strengthen their bond, and to apply the lessons he had learned from the previous encounter with the waitress. Later, as they stopped by a small cafe for ice cream, the father again observed the waitress's impact in his mind. Her simple act of kindness had sparked a change within him, a shift in perspective that he was determined to carry forward. He realized that parenting, at its core, was about being present and responsive, about nurturing a child's emotional well-being with consistency and love. He knew that these moments, though small in the grand scheme of his busy life, would have a lasting effect on his daughter, shaping her sense of security, trust, and happiness. The little girl, enjoying her ice cream, suddenly looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, can we do this every day?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. He smiled, feeling a surge of warmth and determination. "We'll do our best, sweetheart," he replied. "I promise to spend more time with you, and to always be here when you need me." Her smile grew even brighter, and she hugged him tightly, a spontaneous gesture that conveyed trust, love, and connection. The father held her close, understanding that these shared moments were the foundation of a strong, lasting bond. As the afternoon turned into evening, they returned home. The father reflected on the day and the lessons he had absorbed. He understood that wealth, power, and material success could never replace genuine emotional connection. He resolved to be more present, more attentive, and more emotionally available for his daughter. He recognized that the smallest hugs, listening, playful engagement, carried immense significance. They were the tools through which love was expressed. Trust was built, and relationships were strengthened. That evening, he spent time with his daughter in her room, reading her favorite stories and listening to her imaginative tales. He asked questions, offered encouragement, and shared small personal anecdotes. The little girl responded with laughter, curiosity, and excitement. The father felt a sense of fulfillment, unlike any he had experienced before. The lessons from the waitress had transformed his approach to parenting, and he was committed to applying them consistently, understanding that presence and empathy are gifts that could shape a child's life more profoundly than any material provision. As bedtime approached, he tucked her in carefully, adjusting her blanket and brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I love you, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what." The little girl smiled sleepily and hugged him tightly. The father held her close for a moment, feeling the weight of his promise and the responsibility it carried. He understood that this bond, nurtured through attention, care, and presence, would form the foundation of her sense of security and happiness. After leaving her room, He reflected quietly on the events of the past 2 days. The encounter with the waitress had been more than a chance moment. It had been a catalyst for transformation. It had reminded him of the value of small, meaningful gestures and the power of human connection. He understood now that the greatest gift he could give his daughter was not wealth or possessions, but love, attention, and consistency. He resolved to live this lesson daily, knowing that it would shape her life in ways that nothing else could. The father felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The day had been filled with laughter, connection, and learning. He had witnessed the profound effect of genuine kindness on his daughter and had committed to integrating those lessons into his parenting. He understood that the journey ahead would require effort, patience, and presence, but he felt ready and inspired to embrace it fully. The small human moments, the hug, the smile, the shared laughter had shown him the true measure of love and happiness. That night, he sat quietly in his study, thinking about the future. He planned to spend more intentional time with his daughter, to listen actively, and to respond with empathy. He knew that his influence as a father was more powerful than any wealth he could provide. The simple acts of attention, care, and emotional presence would have a lasting impact, shaping her sense of self, her trust in others, and her understanding of love. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, determined to apply the lessons he had learned from the waitress and to nurture a meaningful, lasting bond with his daughter as he finally went to bed. He thought of his daughter sleeping peacefully in her room. The warmth of her small hand in his earlier moments, the sparkle in her eyes, and the trust she had placed in him filled him with hope and resolve. He knew that the journey of being a present and caring father would be ongoing, but he felt confident and committed. The day had been a turning point, and he was determined to live the lesson fully. That love, attention, and genuine connection were the true treasures of life, far beyond any wealth or material success.